Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another Wednesday here chat conversation with my good friend Beth English, all the way from Nashville, and myself here, Sergio Gomez in Chicago, and we're having such a great time. Beth, how are you?
I am doing so good. I love being back in Nashville in my log cabin studio. This is not a virtual studio. It
No,
is
super,
cool.
super good to see you, Beth. Today we're going to talk about turning failures into success stories, right? I think a topic that maybe we have talked about before here and there, but I would like to provide 5 steps in which I like to look at it when I go into a failure mode, which just happened to me recently in the studio on a new series I'm working on. So I think it's a perfect, fresh in my mind topic to look at how I can turn this into a success and how it can also help us in other aspects of life and our business and our career as well. So we all have experienced failure or, things that we learn from, right? And I see you're not in your head bed there too. It's part of life, right?
It's part of it, and failure is not really a bad word. It just means that you're learning and growing. And,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means there's maybe something that you did that you could, improve upon.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. There's 5 points. I want to make sure we go through them and get to cover them all. And the first thing, I love what you said. It's not a bad word, right? Failure sometimes has like this huge negative connotation for good reasons, of course. When we are in school, I think it all starts from we are really small, and you get an F, right, from your first paper that you're already I remember my first kind of a failing grade or fail, how disappointing it was for my parents and things like that. So, if we kind of grow up with this kind of failure mentality, like the worst thing that could ever happen. But, as you mentioned, there are stepstones into the next thing that could help us to get to where we are. So this week I was, more than a week, I've been working on this brand new series that I've been sharing on my Instagram for a while. And it's 8 new pieces all on a format that I'm typically not my size. They are very tall pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and they're mid-size. And so I have those 8 going plus 4 more, and to see how many of them actually will become successful pieces. um and in the process I've been having like such a hard time. Like the moment they're coming out really good, I get excited, I go into the next step, and then like it all fails. Like I've been destroying that series like 3 times now, and finally, finally it's coming out into the other side, where I can finally say I'm feeling very excited about it. But if I had done this episode the week before, I was totally frustrated, totally like totally going crazy, because they were just failed after failed after failed. I mean, I kept trying and it just wasn't working. So out of that experience, I came up with these 5 points. So the first thing that I want to share, and this can apply not only on our studio, but anything that we are trying, that we're working on as artists or creators, is to recognize it. Right, recognize it, smell the failure, recognize it, and that's I think something very important. At some point as I was working the series, uh, I had to realize, this is not working. I have failed in some ways here. So that was the first step, recognizing it. And because it's really easy to just keep going and not stopping to recognize it as something that needs to be changed. And I think that's a failure in my mind, when you recognize something needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that one?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean about when you start to experience that tension, like that resistance, and you start to feel it like you said, you were frustrated. And
Mm-hmm.
like at that point, that's when I always walk away and I
Mm-hmm.
just try to like get that feeling to just kind of like move through me and just try to like reset because you don't want that energy in the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Right.
so I think that it's important to listen. And I just love that you're talking about this topic today too, because, for everyone watching, I mean, we look at you and think, he could never have any trouble in the studio. Like he's got it all figured out. So it's really nice to just know that we all go through this.
Exactly, totally right. And so I'm gonna combine the next two together, 2 and 3, because I think they also sound kind of cool together. So the step
Okay.
number 2 is own it, and then number 3 will be forget about it, which also
Mhm.
you mentioned too. So once you recognize it, right? It's like, okay, I know there's something here that is just not working. Then own it. It's so easy to blame other things, and I actually started blaming other factors, right? When I recognize, okay, this is not working, I started blaming, well, because I'm probably really tired, or because I'm too distracted, or because I'm not allowing myself sometimes. So having like some sort of a pity party or excuses in my head or why not. But then I realized, well, I have to own it. I made these marks on the canvas, right? For whatever reason, didn't work the way I expected it. So I have to own that mistake, right? I have to own that there was something I wanted to do on one piece. And then I'm like, because it was easy, I just carry it over into all the other pieces. And by doing so, I ruined something that was really happening, really cool. And so I had to own that mistake. And I actually, something that helped me a lot too is kind of talking to others. So I talked to a friend of mine who is a painter too, and I sent him some pictures, and so I was sharing the process with him, and so I was owning, this is my mistake, this is what I did wrong. And then the next step, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes like say, okay, what I'm going to do is just forget about it. Forget about it. I'm going to close my studio, 3 days, forget about it. Like if I have no paintings in there, I'm just going to walk away from it. And so that's combining, 2 and 3, owning it and stepping away from it, which you pointed out. So I'm going to go to 4 since we kind of talk about this, and then we'll revisit them together. And so I left the studio. I forgot about it as much as I could. Although you always have it in the back of your mind, especially when you experience some sort of failure, right? It could be, in the case I'm talking about paintings, but it could be something that you try, something that you launch, or, a marketing piece that you thought was going to do really well and it is really bad, so it's a good idea to kind of set it, forget it, but then return it to analyze it. And I think that's really where there's a lot of value on that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about number 4 is going back to it after we left the back and analyzing, and maybe talking about some of the ways in which you analyze something after you leave it behind and then you go back to it. How do we analyze that? Which for me was like sitting in the studio for a long time, just looking at these things and trying to understand, what I did wrong before I could come up with something to do it right.
Yeah, that's a great way to approach it, because I think when we do get frustrated and we're judging ourselves, we're judging our work, we're being highly critical, we are blocking what it is that we could see that could be that way out into like, okay, well, what's the next step after this? Oftentimes in my own practice, the failure that I'm experiencing is actually part of just the end piece, right? It's part of the process, and it shows up later, even though it's not the finished piece, like it's part of the process. So we have to love the parts of the process, even when they feel challenging. And it's the same in life, right? Like we're going to struggle. It's going to be hard, but like rejoice in that, because you're going to learn something, right? Like you probably, when you go back to analyze, are learning something about the way that you were creating that's going to impact the way you create in the future. And so it's all just part of like the process, the experience, the journey, right? Till you get to that final piece. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's all those steps as you go through. It's not easy, because when you're in the middle of it, it's like, you want to get to the result right away. And for me, it was like 3 specific stages. And usually, when I work on a series, it's not that problematic for me, but this one, for some reason, it was just giving me a headache. It's like that child that doesn't want to listen, right?
And artists, they want to be so dramatic. They're like, oh,
yes. Yeah,
I didn't do it right. Something's wrong with me.
I made actually a couple of reels on my Instagram or stories, I think, when I'm just in my studio. You can see my feet going like this, because I was like, I don't know what to do next. And I was so dramatic as well myself. And so then the last step, which we talk about, recognize it first, then own it, then forget about it, and then return to it and analyze it. And the last step is engage with it again, and engage fully, which for me was, after I analyzed it, realize, okay, make a plan. What am I going to do next? I put a series of steps. And then in this, stage of analyze it and then engaging with it fully again, when I come back, it was this idea of, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to forgive myself for that. It's a process, part of the process we mentioned, and I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to go and try new things. And it was actually very cool that at the end, some unexpected things happened with the way I was treating the painting. And it's just turning out into a totally new series that I was not expecting, and I'm super excited about, which I will be sharing in my Instagram probably in a couple of weeks or so as they are fully finished. But, I would have never arrived to that end result without having gone through this series of struggles and not giving up, which I was very close to say, I forget, I'm going to go back to my large paintings or other ideas that I had, just because this format is not what I'm usually used to, and I'm not liking it. But I'm glad I stuck with it for, for the weeks and the hardships of it, and now I have come to the end result. So hopefully that also gives us a framework. I learned from it, not only as an artist, but also looking at all the things that I do in my marketing, in my businesses, and look at, how many times sometimes I don't push it all the way fully, just because I miss the opportunity to learn from it.
Mm. Yes, that's so true. You just perfectly described the creative process.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think we just have to give ourselves grace through it. Like, we're the vessel, like we're supposed to be open, the one to receive and to express, right? And so, and it is hard. Like, we're not perfect beings, right? It's just gonna come to us when it does, and then when it comes out great, celebrate that. When it comes out not so great, still celebrate that. Know that you're learning. I know this isn't working out right now, but I'm learning. I'm going to figure it out. Because anytime we're creating anything, whether it's a painting or we're writing something new or making ceramics or anything, it all starts from nothing and it becomes what it is with that energy that we put into it. And like you said, sometimes we don't follow through all the way with everything that we have to give. And that's something to think about too. I know I'm guilty of stopping short when I could have maybe like taken it a bit further and it would have been better. But at the same time, like, try to enjoy the process, even when it's not enjoyable.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to end our conversation. And Beth, where can our friends find you on social media and on your web?
You guys can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Beth English, on my website, bethenglish.com, and in the Nashville Creative Group. If you guys want to come hang out with us over there on Facebook and Instagram, we would love to have you be part of our community. And what about you, Sergio?
Super. Yeah, you guys can find me on all the social, Sergio Gomez Art. My website is sergiogomezonline.com. If you want to check out all my other resources, go to theartistnextlevel.com. So thank you, my friends, for being with us today. Tune in again next Wednesday. We'll be here, and it will be really, really fun. Another great conversation. So goodbye, Beth. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.